Welcome to HFF DFW, where our focus is Yeshua, family, and discipleship. We hope you enjoyed today's message.
I love hearing that. Give me just a second. I'm going to sit up here. I think. There we go. I do this every time I go through my notes before, and then I'm all the way down at the bottom, then I get up here and I have to scroll all the way back up to the top. All right. So today I'm going to be talking about a story that probably, I think, maybe most of us have read at least a dozen times. If you've watched The Chosen at all, you got to see a pretty cool adaptation of her story as well. But keeping in line with our series on true worship, that's where we're going to focus today with the Samaritan woman at the well, which I absolutely love this story. But getting into the message, I want to talk about words. Words carry power, right? Whoever said, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," is a liar. Okay. Anyways, I've heard that some of the most sincere words in Christian life have pretty much been misunderstood so badly that we oftentimes steer clear of them. Words like longing, dependence, surrender. We hear longing and we think dissatisfaction. We hear dependence and we think of weakness. We hear surrender, we think loss. But what if we've been reading those words from the wrong vantage point? Longing, if we look closer, is an inner stretching placed inside of us on purpose. It's a built-in reminder that you were made for more than what this world can actually give you. Think about it this way. Hunger doesn't mean something is wrong with you. You get hungry because your body needs nourishment. It's a signal that your body needs. It's working exactly the way that it was designed to work. Longing works the same way. When your soul aches for something, it can't seem to find it in this world, and that's a signal. Your soul is oriented towards something bigger, and it knows it when it's settling for something less. If we could fill ourselves, if we could meet every need, if we could meet every need and every quiet ache on our own, we would never go looking to Him. The longing is a gift. It's what keeps us from staying in the same place for too long. And you were designed to belong, to connect deeply, to be truly filled, and that's what we're going to see today in John chapter 4. In this passage, there's a woman who's been returning to the same well for years, longing, searching, and unsatisfied. And a lot of people want to make her story about her choices, about her 5 husbands, about her moral failures. But I think there's more to it than that. It runs right down to the place where identity lives, where the need to belong lives, where the longing to feel whole and connected and be fully known lives. I want to read her story together. Everybody please turn to John chapter 4. If you don't have it in your Bibles, we're going to have it up here posted today. But we're going to begin with, like I said, in John. And what we're going to be going over is where Jesus was traveling to the region of Galilee. Well, let's read this. Verse 1, when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard he was making and baptizing more disciples than John, though Jesus himself was not baptizing, but the disciples were, he left Judea and went again to Galilee. He had to travel through Samaria. We're going to stop right there. And I want you to notice this small but very significant word in the Greek. It's just as small in the English language as in the Greek. It's the word had. In the Greek, it's day. In John 4:4, it says he had to pass through Samaria. And I want you to see how significant this is, because typically we would glance right over such a small word, had. But in their day, Jewish people routinely took a longer route around Samaria on purpose. And we've got it real big up here. They would take what was called as the Transjordan route purposefully to avoid the Samaritans. Why? Well, let's just say the Samaritans and the Jews didn't get along. Not at all. So, as we look at the map here, the red line is how you could get from Jerusalem to the Galilee, going through Samaria. And the blue line is taking it was a longer and more treacherous route, but it was the route that the Jews preferred to take so that they didn't have to deal with the Samaritans, the Transjordan route. So, and we'll leave that slide up, but I'm going to go over this just real quick as a brief history of why they didn't get along. It goes back to Jacob's well, a place tied to Jacob. Obviously, it's called Jacob's well. And the land that he gave to Joseph and later his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. About 800 years after Jacob, after Solomon, the kingdom split. The northern tribes break away under a new northern king, Jeroboam, because of heavy taxation under Judah's king, Rehoboam, who was Solomon's son. Jeroboam set up 2 golden calves as a system of worship, one in Bethel and the other in Dan, a political move to keep people from going back to Jerusalem to worship. Those golden calves sound familiar to anybody? So, new worship centers were established, and the region once associated with Ephraim and Manasseh now became known as Samaria. About 200 years later, Assyria conquered the north. Many of Israel's leaders and skilled people were taken into exile, while a remnant remained. Foreign people from other conquered nations were brought in to intermarry with them. The result was a mixed people with mixed worship, what becomes known as the Samaritans, who center their worship on Mount Gerizim instead of Jerusalem. And you can see Mount Gerizim also up there, about midway up on the left. When the Jews returned from their exile, the Samaritans offered to help rebuild the temple, but were rejected, so that divide deepened. Then, during the Hasmonean period, John Hyrcanus marched north and destroyed the Samaritan temple as part of a purging of anything ungodly from the land. They both claimed that they were the legitimate chosen people who worshiped on what they claimed to have their own mountains. The Samaritans believed that the Samaritans believed and followed Torah, but did not believe in the same prophets. By the time of Jesus, the hate between these people groups was still at a boiling point. So when we see Jesus and his disciples going through Samaria this day, this had-to moment was more in the realm of divine providence. And I want to show you that, and we're going to actually, this is where we're going to nerd out. Lay, thank you for using that word earlier. So we're going to nerd out. We're actually going to be going into a lexicon, looking at the BDAG lexicon. BDAG actually defines day as it is necessary, as in one must or one has to, denoting compulsion of any kind. BDAG carefully subdivides its meanings in 3 ways. 1, logical necessity. So, what must follow from something else. In other words, if a domino falls, those next in line must fall. Logical necessity. Or moral necessity. What ought to happen. A father loves his child, not because the law forces him to, but because love demands it. Or divine necessity. What God's God's plan requires. And in John 4:4, the context demands the third category. Geographically, Jesus did not have to pass through Samaria in the sense of, to get to the other side. But this path was providential. This was God's will, God's plan, God's appointed time, not only for him, but also for her. I need you to understand that she went to the well that day at the worst possible hour, and her excuse was not because it was too crowded at other times. She went during the heat of the day to avoid the stairs. Shame had become her calendar. Pain had become her schedule. She had built an entire rhythm of life around not being seen, and this day was no different. Or was it? She was about to have an encounter, church. Are you ready for this? Let's keep reading. Verse 5. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the property that Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, worn out from his journey, sat down at the well. It was about noon. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. "Give me a drink," Jesus said to her, because his disciples had gone into town to buy food. Verse 9, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" she asked him. For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Now, I want you to picture this. The disciples have gone to town. Jesus is alone, and this woman who came to the well specifically to avoid people walks right into one conversation that she never planned on having. And the first thing Jesus does is asks her for something. "Give me a drink," which seems like the most ordinary request in the world. But in their culture, in that moment, what he did right then was just not done on at least 4 different levels that I'll go over real quick. He was a man speaking publicly to a woman not related to him. That alone broke social protocol. He was a Jew speaking to a Samaritan. Centuries of hostility in that single request. He was asking her to share her vessel, which, according to Jewish purity codes of that day, would render him ceremonially unclean. And he was sitting in her safe space, in that place that she had claimed as her hiding spot, treating it like it was completely common ground. Have you ever gone somewhere, maybe a public place, maybe church, and you have your favorite spot that you sit because there you either get the perfect view or the best sound or the most quiet, and you show up and someone else is in your spot? That's what's going on here. Jesus was interrupting her way of avoiding everyone. When we look at verse 9, she says that Jews don't associate with Samaritans. The Greek word for associate in verse 9, and I'm going to butcher this, but I asked Erica, I was like, how do you even say this word? Psychroiomai, however you say that. It appears only once in the entire New Testament. Only once. And I believe that John was reaching for a word so specific, so unique, because he wanted it to grab our attention. The Greek word means to share vessels, to share table fellowship, to share social spaces. And I think she was trying to remind him, hey, we don't like each other. And why are you sitting in my chair, right? You're not supposed to be in my world, let alone in my special space. But Jesus said, give me a drink. He crossed every wall with one sentence. Now here's what I want you to see about her. She stuck around. She didn't turn her back on him or ignore him. She didn't grab her jar and walk away. She didn't even look at him and complain that she was too introverted. She engaged. She pushed back. She asked questions. How is it that you ask me? Where do you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? And we'll get into all those in a few minutes. There's something in this woman that despite everything, despite the shame, despite the history, despite having her walls standing between her and this man, something in her recognized that this moment was different, and she stayed in it. Now let's get personal for a moment. How many times has God stepped into your ordinary day, not in a dramatic vision, not in a burning bush moment, but just right there in the middle of your routine, and you almost walked away? How many times has he shown up in the form of a conversation that you didn't plan, a message that hit too close, or a moment in worship where something cracked open, and your first instinct was to pick up your jar and leave? But she stayed. And because she stayed, everything in her world changed. A lot of you have heard my testimony, but there was a day back in 2021 that Erica, Maya, and Ryan, and myself, Pierce didn't go that year, did he? He didn't, yeah. So we went to Camp Yeshua, Camp Wow, for the first time. I barely even wanted to go to church at that time, let alone being dragged to a youth camp. But Jesus showed up for me there. He showed up for me in the form of a young teenage boy whose parents were having a rough marriage, and he needed to unload on me. And I had a choice in that moment. Run and hide as much as Erica would allow me, or stay and hear this kid out. And that's what I did. I stayed. I listened. And that encounter changed the course of my life. I would not be standing here on this stage right now if it wouldn't have been for little James, who is now ridiculously tall James. But those moments define us sometimes. I want you to look at verse 10. Jesus answered, "If you knew the gift of God and who is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would ask him, and he would give you living water." Now, the gift of God is a gift that's free. It's unearned. It's completely undeserved. It can't be purchased. It can't be worked for. In Acts 8, when Simon, the sorcerer, tries to buy the gift of God with money, Peter rebukes him sharply. And the whole point is that it can only be received. She has been hauling this water jar to this well every single day, working for every drop, and Jesus says there is something available to you that costs you absolutely nothing and yet everything. Someone here needs to hear this today. You've been hauling your problems back and forth in cracked vessels, in need of a filling up. Not only does he want to fill you up, but he wants to cause you to be able to stay filled with living water. And all he is asking is, will you stay long enough? Not only to receive it, but to let him mend you. And that is the worship invitation hiding inside this conversation. True worship is not what you perform for God. It's what you receive from him when he responds to you. You cannot worship from an empty place. You have to receive before you can give back. And Jesus, right here in this passage, is the one initiating. He crossed every wall. He sat at her well. He asked her for a drink. Church, as she drew near to him, he drew near to her. Is anyone here ready to draw near? Man, it's really quiet in this Methodist church. Now she's about to ask him some good questions here in verse 11. "Sir," said the woman. I love that respect. She's talking to a Jew. This is a Samaritan woman. that respect that she automatically has. Sir, you don't even have a bucket, and the well is deeper, or the well is deep. So where do you get this living water? And you aren't greater than our father Jacob, are you? He gave us the well and drank from it, as did his sons and livestock. Jesus said, everyone who drinks from this water will get thirsty again, but whoever drinks from the water I will give him will never get thirsty again. In fact, the water I will give him will become a well of water springing up in him for eternal life. Sir, the woman said to him, give me this water so that I don't get thirsty and come here to draw water. Now remember, back in the day when someone was acting a certain way, and the only response that you could have with them was, bless their heart. You remember that? Which really just, never mind, I won't say what that really meant. Bless her heart. She still is only thinking about logistics here. She's standing in front of the Son of God and she's thinking, man, if I had this water, I wouldn't even have to come make this stupid trip every day. It's not that she's not getting it, she's just being human. She's hearing Jesus through the lens of her problem. And her problem was having to come back to this well every single day and avoiding people. But Jesus wants to be the source inside of her. He wants to be the source inside of us. He says the water he gives will become a spring leaping up inside of you, something that has so much life in it that it cannot stay still. It bursts out. It leaps forward. It's unstoppable. And that's the difference between religion and what Jesus is offering here. Religion says, keep coming back to the well. Keep making that daily trip. And Jesus says, let me move in. Let me be the source within. You don't need the jar anymore. Some of you have been making this trip, making that trip to the well your whole life. You come to church, you get filled up, and by Tuesday you're completely empty again, and you're counting down the days to when you can come back and get another drink. And I'm not saying don't come, please come. But I want you to hear that Jesus is saying to this woman, he's not offering her a better, he's not offering her a better well. He's offering her a spring inside of her, an unstoppable source that goes where you go. And I'm not talking about a church service. I'm talking about a lifestyle of worship. When's the last time that living water felt like it was leaping inside of you? Not just a quiet peace, but an actual overflow. Let's go back to verse 15 real quick. Sir, the woman said to him, give me this water so that I don't get thirsty and come here to draw water. Now watch what Jesus does in verse 16. Go call your husband, he told her, and come back here. Oh, I don't have a husband, she answered. You have correctly said, I don't have a husband, Jesus said. For you have had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not your husband. What you have said is true. He knows. He already knew before she got to the well. He doesn't say it to shame her. He says it to show her that he already knows. Shame exposes to push you away. Jesus exposes to draw you closer. He's not holding this over her head. He's showing her, I already know everything, and I'm still sitting here. I'm still asking for a drink. I'm still offering you living water. And look at her response in verse 19. Sir, the woman replied, I see that you are a prophet. Now, like I said before, the Samaritans didn't believe in the Jewish prophets. They only believed in Torah. Jesus has just told this woman everything about her most painful and most private history. So she opens up the deepest point of dispute between her people and his. She brings the conversation to worship. Verse 20. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews say that the place to worship is in Jerusalem. Are you finally seeing her heart? Beneath all the shame, beneath all the hiding, beneath the 5 husbands and the noon trips to avoid the crowd, there was a heart that was genuinely longing for God. But she didn't know how to get to him, or that he had already gotten to her. And this is his answer about worship in verse 21. Jesus told her, "Believe me, woman, an hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, because salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Yes, the Father wants such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth." So she asks, which mountain is the right one? Yours or ours? And Jesus essentially says, you're asking the wrong questions entirely. The whole conversation between Jews and Samaritans about worship had always been about location. Where is the right place? Which mountain has God's approval? Who built the legitimate altar? And for centuries, both sides had been so locked into that argument that they missed what worship was actually about in the first place. And Jesus essentially tells her that the location argument is over. The hour has arrived. Now, you hear us talking about the already and not yet. Jesus uses an hour is coming and now is. This is John's way of saying the future has broken into the present. The new thing God promised isn't still on the way. It's standing right here at this well in this conversation right now. And in this hour, the question is no longer where you will worship. The question is more about your heart posture when you do worship. He says in spirit and in truth. I've been hearing these two words get thrown around in church culture my entire life. And I think we sometimes use them without really understanding what Jesus meant when he said them to her. When Jesus says worship in spirit, he's talking about this interior reality of a person standing before God. He's talking about whether your heart is actually engaged or whether you're just going through the motions. The Samaritans had a mountain. They had rituals. They had a form of worship. But Jesus tells her, you worship what you do not know. You can have the whole external structure in place and still be completely disconnected from the God you're supposedly worshiping. Worship in spirit means that you can't just show up and perform the right actions while your heart is somewhere else entirely. God is not impressed by your presence in the room. If your heart is checked out before you even got here. And I think a lot of us know exactly what that feels like. You've sung the songs, you've bowed your head, hit your knees, you've lifted your hands at the right moments. And the whole time, you were somewhere else completely. Thinking about what you're eating after this. Replaying a conversation from yesterday, earlier in the week. Running through your week ahead in your head. The body was present, but what matters was completely absent. And that's what Jesus is confronting with her. And if we're honest, it's what he confronts with us as well. You can have a very moving, very sincere, very passionate worship experience, and that is completely untethered from who God actually is. The Samaritans were sincere in what they were doing. Jesus says they still didn't know what they were worshiping. Truth in your worship has to be anchored in what is actually real about God. Not the version of God that you've constructed that makes you the most comfortable. Not the God who only shows up in parts of scriptures that you like. The God who is fully revealed in the Torah, in the prophets, in the Word made flesh that stood right in front of her at the well. Spirit and in truth together. That's the whole picture. Your heart genuinely engaged and your understanding genuinely grounded. The fire and the anchor at the same time, because the fire without the anchor drifts into whatever feels good. Whatever TikTok says is the best thing next, right? And the anchor without the fire becomes a dead religion. Jesus is saying, I want both at the same time. And here's what gets me every time I read the passage. He's saying this to her. To this woman who had every reason to believe that she was disqualified from real worship. Too much history, wrong mountain, wrong people, wrong life choices. And Jesus sits across from her at the well and says, the Father is looking for worshipers just like you. Not despite who you are, right smack dab in the middle of who you are. The hour has come. Let's continue in verse 25 and 26. The woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Jesus told her, the one speaking to you, am he. Now, in the Greek, it doesn't read the same way as we see it here in our English. It's not that I am he. John uses the divine name. Exodus 3:14, when Moses asked God his name at the burning bush, God says, I am who I am. The Hebrew translates that as Haya, Asher, Haya. But if you look at the Septuagint, right, the Greek translation of that, it's translated as ego eimi. And looking at the Septuagint at Isaiah 43:10, God declares ego eimi as his own identity. And John uses this phrase 7 times in his gospel in this absolute way, and every single time it's God declaring his name. And he says it first to her. Not to Nicodemus, not to the Pharisees, not to the Jerusalem crowd who was looking for signs, to a Samaritan woman at a stone well at noon. The most explicit declaration of messianic identity in the entire Gospel of John, given to the person the religious world had the least use for. He said it to her first. And that's who God seeks. The ones who've been coming back to the same well their entire lives and still haven't found what they're looking for. Inasmuch as he seeks the ones coming each week bearing it all before the throne with their whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. And he looks at them and says, I am the one speaking to you right now. It's me. And that's where worship begins. Not when the music starts, not when the atmosphere shifts. Worship begins when you finally realize who it is who called you to this moment. The God of the universe is the one who calls you. We're almost done here, but I want to finish reading this story. Her story is very important. Just then his disciples arrived, and they were amazed that he was talking with a woman. That wall, right? he was amazed. They were amazed that he was talking with a woman, yet no one said, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then the woman left her jar, went into town, and told the people, "Come, see a man who told me everything I did. Could this be the Messiah?" They left the town and made their way to him. In the meantime, the disciples kept urging him, "Rabbi, eat something." But he said, "I have food to eat that you do not know about." The disciples said to one another, "Could someone have brought him something to eat?" Bless their hearts. He said, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work." Jesus told them, "Don't you say there are still 4 months? And then comes the harvest. Listen to what I'm telling you. Open your eyes and look at the fields because they are ready for harvest. The reaper is already receiving pay and gathering fruit for eternal life, so the sower and the reaper can rejoice together. For in this case, the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap what you didn't labor for. Others have labored, and you have benefited from their labor." Now many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of what the woman said when she testified, "He told me everything I did." So the Samaritans came to him. They asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there for 2 days. Many more believed because of what he said, and they told the woman, "We no longer believe because of what you said. We have heard for ourselves and know that this really is the Savior of the world." She left her jar. She gave it all to the one true King. She encountered God that day. And in the same way, it's time that we give it all to him. Worship team, go ahead and come on up. Now, you've probably arranged something in your life around your pain. Maybe it's not the hour that you go to the well, if we have those here. Maybe it's the relationships you avoid, or the rooms you won't enter, the conversations you redirect. Maybe you've built a schedule that keeps the wound from being exposed. I know I've done that. But what I need you to see is that right in the middle of that schedule, Jesus had to be exactly where you were hiding. He already knows everything, and he's still sitting at your well, in your place. The question she had to answer that day is the same one sitting in front of you right now. Will you stay long enough to receive what he's offering? Will you let the I am be who he says he is in your life? She left her jar, and a city was changed because of it. What jar are you still carrying? Leave it here today, and let's worship.